Welcome to the Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO, Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're fully sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the very beginning. So thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so much. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon, a.k.a. Justin Snicker, for his contribution of his time, his music, and his voice for the intro that you've just heard. He's an award-winning composer of Halloween horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music, which can be found on all of your favorite music platforms. Also, big thank you to Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the banners, the logos here at the show. Check him out on Facebook and Instagram. Also specializes in the horror genre and does fantastic commission pieces. So tonight we welcome James Szubski. Yeah. Got it. Former volunteer search and rescue EMT, wildland firefighter, and mountain guide, James Szubski will be discussing the wide array of paranormal activity in the Columbia River Gorge, which includes different cryptids, UFOs, portals, small humanoids, and of the such. But in order to communicate with him, you have to get into our chat rooms. And of course, there are 7. And remember, when our guests are on, they can see your comments, but it's like, 7 lanes coming down into one. So we do our very best to get to everyone, but we have to go to the pace of the guest. So as we wait for him, let's find out what Bubbles has been up to.
I like the word humanoids. So I wrote it.
Humanoids, yeah.
Hello, Merry Christmas.
Could be anything,
Hello. Can you believe it's only a few days away?
Yeah, I know.
I can, by everybody on the road. I'm telling you now. Just by the drivers. Almost being killed today was a great sign. I was starting to tell you how I had someone next to me in their lane ended, and it was like 80 kilometers an hour.
Yes.
And he didn't slow down. I had to go into the opposite oncoming traffic's their left-hand turn lane, right, to let him in, or he would have gone off into the ditch. And now when I look back, I'm thinking I should have let him go into the ditch. But anyways, I was so angry. I actually threw my phone. I went with my phone out the thing and photographed his car while I gave him the beautiful finger from the mirror. But because you never know if there's scratches on your vehicle, at least you have their
wow.
You have their thing. And I hope he got caught on all those many traffic cameras we have in this fine city.
You know what? It's pretty brutal. I watched
well, this was close to your neck of the woods. I was really pissed off.
Yeah, well, it's every man for himself out there. We watched a white car this morning just zipping in and out of traffic at a high rate of speed, no signal, tight spots. I'm like, where are police when you need them? Because that's how accidents happen in the highways.
That's how you kill people. You kill other people this way.
It is brutal.
I really hope that next year begins on a different level of energy, a different frequency. I know people are down and tight with finances, but always remember that Christmas isn't about what's under the tree, but who's around you.
That's right.
When you're grateful for who you have and who's around you, and when you start looking at it that way, you can enjoy it. Take a deep breath, stop going with this madness and this rush and being nasty to people. People don't even say hello to each other anymore. It's disgusting.
It's out there right now.
Also friendly here. Hi, Maria. Merry Christmas.
I know.
Like they just have to chill. as the kids would say nowadays. Chill.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, perfect, Ed. Yeah.
Driving a weapon. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And some of those people driving that weapon are 17. Let's not forget that. They don't have the reflexes that we do or the experience to get out
No.
of something, and you can kill someone. I'm not saying them. I'm saying you could kill these teenagers. And
Right.
yeah.
It
So just
does.
be careful. I mean, my daughter, one of her friend's brothers, is in critical care in the hospital since early Sunday morning. It's not a phone call a parent wants to get, and he was hit head on, critical condition.
No,
So,
see, there's just so
guys,
much, I just see so much right now. I don't get on social media often, but hey Tamara, but I'll tell you, it's there's so much just hatred and drama, and if I have to hear, I won't get into some of the things I'm reading and seeing, but I'm just like, it's terrible. And I get it's a tough time of year for many people. It's a tough year for many people. A tough go of it, And but I just feel that, like, how many times we say you can't help what happens, but you can help how you handle it.
there's no
So
excuse for
important
negligence.
because you put out your anger or your shit showness or whatever it is you want to do. That's what you're drawing back towards you. And that's not what you want, because then you end up in a vicious cycle that could get you into, a deeper state of whatever it is.
Oh, as we're, and also something that we talked about earlier, be careful who you lash that anger out to, because you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what state they're in, and you don't know who they know. So, like, just be careful with your words, please. I'm just seeing a lot of dragon fire and snake tongues out there right now, and it's too much, and it shouldn't be happening.
Right.
It shouldn't be happening.
High vibes, people. Be happy.
Let's raise that. Like, let's bring in the new year with such joy and hope. We've got the big C behind us.
Right.
Let's bring it in.
And our guest is here. So on that lovely high vibrational note. Hi, James.
Hi, James. How are you?
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, we're good.
You can. You hear us okay?
Yep.
Excellent.
My speaker working right.
No, it sounds
you're
good so
you're
far.
good.
Yeah, you cut out for a minute, but you're back.
All right. Awesome.
So how are you?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
We're good. But I have to tell you, I've been super excited about this segment because it's one of these locations that has a mix of like everything. And it's like, you just want to know everything, because I've researched places like this, and the national parks are always they're a mix of bag of everything. So, but this is one that I have not researched. So this is going to be all brand new for me, and I'm so excited. So I guess the best place to start, you'll find this is really laid back, very round table like. I need to know what brought you to this amazing place.
Well, so I have been living in Washington State since about 1988, mostly up in the Seattle area. And
been there.
My wife, say again?
I said I've been there. It's beautiful. Love Seattle.
Yeah. And so my wife's mother, Margie, she had a couple of stores down in the Columbia River Gorge, and she passed away about 3 years ago. And
I'm sorry.
Thank you. And so we had to make a decision about, whether we wanted to move to the gorge and take over the family businesses. And so we decided to do that. And we had visited the gorge a couple of times. We'll get into my background in a little bit, but
of course.
So I've got a lot of outdoor adventure experience, and this place is sort of heaven for a guy like me. And so one of the stores is Margie's Outdoor Store. It's sort of a outdoor adventure gear is one of the primary things we sell. But, we've got a mix of other things. And to me, the joy of the outdoors is sort of the magical experience you have. And so the way we sort of set up the store is that it has backpacks and climbing gear, and also crystals and tarot cards and
with
all
the
that kind of
climbing
fun
gear, just in case you want to take it with you up the mountain
Or
Well,
jump off the mountain.
or across that damn bridge that just sits on the water
was
that scares the
chasing
crap
you.
out of me.
Yeah.
That bridge was not, I did not need to be told while we were in the middle of it in traffic that this is actually floating on the water. I'm just like, what? But anyways, beautiful
Right.
state. Yes.
Yeah, and so and the gorge itself is just as a magical kind of a place. And so I wanted to build an experience that people could go out into the wilderness and enjoy that connection and that kind of a thing. Well, right after, like, as soon as like we really started getting going with this outdoor gear part of the store, people started coming in and telling us all kinds of Sasquatch stories and UFO stories, and I found it fascinating. So I put up a big sign in the window, and it said, "File paranormal reports here."
I
And
saw that on your website. I'm like, this is a genius.
Seriously?
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And I wasn't sure what we are going to do with it, but it seemed, well, first of all, very, very interesting to me. And I set some parameters for the employees. I said, we are going to treat everyone who comes in with the utmost respect. We're not going to nervously giggle at what they're talking about.
Yeah.
We're going to listen to their story, take in the data, ask intelligent follow-up questions, and take them seriously. And, in the beginning, I figured, well, I'm sure some folks will come in and, tell a tall tale. And I thought, what's the harm in that? It's fun. And we'll see how it goes. Well, in 2 years, it's not quite 2 years we've had the paranormal program. We have had over 250 reports. And
Wow.
that is a huge, we way over index compared to anywhere else that I've ever heard of. And these reports range. So Sasquatch is big out here, always has been. In fact, Washington State has the highest number of Bigfoot reports per capita of any state.
It's like Western Canada, and they're just right over top. So I'm not
Very
surprised.
identical.
Yes.
BC and Washington. They're identical. Yeah.
And Washington State also has the highest number of UFO sightings per capita.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're kind of, we're sort of in the right place for it. But within that, there are two counties in Washington State that are in the gorge. It's Klickitat County, where my stores are, and Skamania County, where my house is.
Right.
And so Skamania County was the very first government entity in the world that had Sasquatch protection legislation on the books. And
Really?
all the way back in 1968, they passed legislation that said it is a felony to hunt and kill Bigfoot in Skamania County.
Like California. I love that.
Yeah. And that law has been updated and amended over the years, but it's a real thing out here for the people who live here.
Wow.
So, like I said, we have had numerous Sasquatch reports, lots of UFO reports, lots of glowing orb reports. There's a couple of towns in the gorge that have a lot of ghost activity in them. And there's a lot of strange, like, temporal anomalies and things like that. And the most interesting one that kind of took me by surprise was a creature we call the Klickitat Ape Cat. And this is an enormous Black Panther-like creature that some of the reports say it has a face that looks kind of like a monkey. And we've had over 80 reports of that creature alone.
Really?
And so, yeah. So
and there's something similar to that in the UK, right?
That was the Beast of Bodmin Moor,
Right.
I think is what you might be referring to. And that seemed to be a smaller shaped cat, smaller size cat, and more along the lines of like a jaguar or
right.
Okay.
Certainly not with a primate face by any means.
Yeah. And so, we'll get into all of these details. Like I said, it's so you can imagine our store, like with 250 reports in 2 years, it's sort of like a new Scooby-Doo mystery walks through our door a couple times a week,
You have a mystery machine. You're driving a mystery machine,
Get ready. Wow.
So it is, so I want to say at the outset, to me, like, this is such a joyful and amazing, wondrous experience. To be living in a place where all of the questions aren't answered is remarkable, and to sort of be a ground zero for that is really, really fun.
It's
Um,
exciting.
yeah. So it might help for your listeners to get a sense of like what the gorge is and where it's located and all that kind of
That was
stuff.
the next on the list. So take her away.
Can I just say something before you get into that really quickly?
Sure.
Thank you. You have this law that no one can kill a Sasquatch. They have this in California, where depending on where you live, you call it Sasquatch or Bigfoot. In Canada, we tend to say Sasquatch more. That's got to be based on some evidence that has been brought in, shot, and killed, right?
Well, it originated because there were so many sightings out here that we were getting a lot of folks from out of the county coming in with high-powered rifles, and they had full-on expeditions. They were going to come and they were going to kill this thing that people were reporting on.
Yeah.
And so part of the motivation was to protect the local citizens. Like we didn't want people here didn't want to get shot, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's no, to my knowledge, there's no actual shooting recorded. No creature has been. Well, that's not true.
Well, you would never be told that, though. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
We
there
wouldn't
are some
know.
stories about a group of miners back in the 1920s that their whole cabin was attacked, but they were shooting at them, and it was kind of a strange situation. But to get into the gorge, so
Please.
The Columbia River is the largest river in North and South America that flows into the Pacific Ocean. And it forms the border between southern Washington state and northern Oregon state. And it's the gorge itself is an area that's probably 80 miles long. And it runs directly through the Cascade Mountains. So the Cascade Mountains start up in British Columbia and they extend to northern California. And you may have heard like Mount Shasta is part of the Cascade.
Oh, yes.
Mount Rainier,
Yes.
Mount Hood, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens.
Yes.
It's got many, many peaks that are over 10,000 feet.
Right.
And just to give your listeners a sense of the size and scope. So this is a very rugged, mountainous wilderness area. And its size is roughly equivalent if you took the 10 smallest states in the United States and mushed them together. That's about the land area that we're talking about for the Cascade Mountains.
Wow.
So these are dramatic, beautiful mountains, and just like you'd imagine in the Pacific Northwest with, deep primeval forests. And the Columbia River runs right through the middle of them. And it is the only sea level passage through the mountains. And so you can go literally from 30 feet above sea level to 3,000 feet in less than half a mile. And so it's a really unique and beautiful place. In fact, it is so beautiful, so jaw-droppingly beautiful here, that in the 1980s, Congress, the U.S. Congress, in a bipartisan law, passed a brand new law that protected the gorge in a way that no other place had been protected before. It became a national scenic area. And so basically that means that we have many of the protections that a national park has, but people are allowed to live here and have businesses here and, go about their daily lives. And so it's a really extraordinary place. There are over 90 named waterfalls on the Oregon side alone. And some of those waterfalls are over 600 feet tall.
Wow.
On the west side of the mountains, it's a traditional Pacific Northwest rainforest, just like you would imagine, moss on the trees and towering 120-foot Douglas firs. But on the east side of the mountains, it's actually a high plains desert. And so there are no trees. And you'll find like these stunning desert, like mesas and buttes, like those sort of flat top cliff sides.
Right.
There are over 600 known caves out here. And so the place, just in terms like if you're into outdoor adventure, people paraglide, windsurf, rock climb.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it is just whitewater rafting, mountain biking, hiking, you name it. It's pretty much all here.
Right.
And so the river sort of forms the core, and the upper, like the sort of the northern limit, is bounded by Mount Adams, which is a tremendously famous UFO hotspot.
It is.
And then also Mount St. Helens, which of course erupted in 1980.
And do you
And
know
then-
that they hauled out some Bigfoot helicopters? Hauled
I've
out
heard the tales.
Bigfoot right there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then also on the southern end, it's sort of bounded by Mount Hood, which is a very famous big Sasquatch hotspot.
Right.
So just in terms of natural beauty, it's hard to find a place that's more beautiful. And you drive around out here. So I live sort of in the rainforest side where my house is, and I drive about 25 minutes to the store. And it's like driving through paradise. I mean, I go from basically the rainforest to the edge of the desert, and it's just stunning. So that's sort of where we're located. We're about 60 miles east of Portland, Oregon. So that's our nearest big city.
It's a beautiful area. It's and it's all very active all along there. Every place you've mentioned, I mean, that you've had within the field, people are very well aware of all of this incredible activity. And you just seem to be right at the top of all that. It just makes its way downhill.
Exactly.
But I have to ask you, it's like it's not considered a national park, but it's pretty much the size, if not more, when you 80 miles. That's craziness. That's a lot of space. Do you guys fall into any of the mysterious disappearances, much like all of these missing 411 sort of disappearances?
In fact, there's an area. So the whole area is volcanically active,
right?
And there's a spot on many maps. It's called the Big Lava Bed. I refer to it as Broke Leg Barrows,
Right.
And it's like a lava flow that's the size of the island of Manhattan. So Manhattan in New York, and just to give you a sense, like 1.7 million people live on the island of Manhattan. So that's like how big of an area we're talking about. Basically, 8,000 years ago, this volcano erupted, and it sort of pushed this lava. It filled a mountain valley, and the area is incredibly mysterious. It's really difficult terrain. So I was a U.S. Army infantry soldier. I was a wildland forest firefighter, mountain guide, and a nationally certified search and rescue EMT. And so I have been a professional land navigator since age 19.
Wow.
And this Broke Leg Barrows area is one of the most rugged, impassable areas that I have ever seen in my life. And you had asked about missing people. Well, an individual went missing there. His name was Christopher Zetzewitz, and he went missing in September of 2014. Very mysterious circumstances. And basically, he was out there with a buddy, and they were trying to find a cave in this lava bed. And they got separated maybe by 20 yards, no more than that. And then he vanished. And there was no trace of him ever found again. There were hundreds of searchers, including the military. There was dogs and helicopters, thousands of man hours, and no trace of him was ever found. Now,
okay, can I just ask you a quick question? When do they call military in for missing persons?
Well, that's part of the mystery. This is so I'm a member of a nationally recognized search and rescue team, and we will call in the military for helicopter assets, but it is very, very rare to call.
It's not common. I worked missing persons for over 10 years. It's not common to call in military. Usually military, it's usually when there's fugitives on the run, not someone who's gone missing during a hike.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the mystery. And you'll, as we get into it, there's all kinds of strange government activity in the area as well.
Highly suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, So the thing about Broke Leg Burrows is that compasses don't work properly there. Cell phones don't work there. I had my drone out there maybe a month and a half ago, and it was having trouble acquiring a GPS signal.
Mm-hmm.
And radios have limited range. So
Right.
That's military.
try to explain what this place looks like. So in the Lord of the Rings movie, they're going to go through this place called Amon Wheel, and Gimli says, the dwarf, he says, it's an impassable labyrinth of razor sharp rocks.
Right.
And that is
Mhm.
what
I remember it.
accurate description of this place.
Yes.
You know, and so it's like every rock is turned over. There are these strange trenches. Well, I had a personal experience out there that was really confounding. So for months, I had heard that there was there's a one single 4x4 track that leads, just scratches into this southern tip of this thing. And for months, I was driving around in my rig looking for it. Finally found it. And this scratch sort of led to an area with these unusual pools that were filling up these depressions. And it looked like some people had camped there. And what I found, and the weird thing was that out here, when you put a road in a wilderness area, you're looking to do some type of resource extraction, whether it be, you're mining or you're doing, logging or something like that. There are no resources in Broke Leg Burrows that anyone can access. Like there's no sawed down trees or anything like that. The strangest thing was that I found some spent bullet casings, and they were 5.56 NATO rounds, which is the same thing that people will use in an AR-15.
Mm-hmm.
That in and of itself is not unusual. Guys will go out in the woods and they'll shoot at stuff and have fun with it. The thing that was mysterious was that I found machine gun links. And so when I was in the military, I carried a M249 squad automatic weapon, which is a belt-fed machine gun. And this is a weapon that civilians are not allowed to carry. It's an automatic weapon, obviously a weapon of war. And the fact that there were belt links, machine gun belt links, and it looked like they were firing in all directions, which is another kind of a strange thing. Now, these were old casings and hard to really do any kind of real tracking related to what had happened there. But so that was kind of a mysterious thing. But like I said, I was out there doing some exploring, and I wanted to fly the drone and take a look at some of these areas. And I parked my rig and walked maybe 150 feet into the Broke Leg Burrows. Moss on the trees and strange rock formations. And there was a trench. So the lava had flowed through there, created a lava tube cave, and that lava tube cave had collapsed. And so it formed this long, maybe 150-foot long trench, jagged rocks. And I flew the drone up and down it a couple of times. Now imagine this is a north-south trench. And so I'm an extremely experienced outdoor land navigator, know what I'm doing. And so I had flown the drone there, checked it out, understood the area, walked to the northern tip of it, made a right turn, and started heading west deeper into Broke Leg Burrows, into this really strange landscape. And then I had this experience, and I think the only way to really kind of describe it, it was a temporal and spatial displacement.
Yeah.
So
that's very fascinating.
Yeah. So I did that right-hand turn, headed west, and walked for probably 250 yards, right? And I got to another trench, and I said, oh, this is really interesting. I'm going to fly the drone down this one as well. And I was flying the drone and looking around. And after about 5 minutes of being in that new spot, I realized that I was back where I had started at the southern end of the first trench that I had started at. So basically, I was 110 degrees off of my direction that I thought I was at, and 250 yards diagonally away from where I thought I was. Now, you have to understand, for a person like me who's been land navigating for over 30 years, and it's when someone gets lost in the woods, I'm the kind of person they call to find them.
Yeah.
To be completely turned around and not even aware of that I was at a place that I was already at. When you do this kind of land navigation in wilderness areas, there's a whole string of things that you're doing in the back of your mind. Like you're tracking your pace count, you're keeping a sense of where the sun is, you're looking for landmarks, and then you get your own sort of internal navigational sense that you're relying on. There's a number of
which
things
I don't have. So I'd be calling you. Yeah. I don't even have it driving with it on my car. So yeah.
Come get us, James. Yeah.
And
Go
so-
ahead.
Where
Sorry.
am I? Yeah.
Yeah. And and I was completely bamboozled, like unbelievably, like never in 30 years had I been so wrong about where I was in a wilderness area. And to me, that was like, there's a first for everything, but man, and the thing that really freaked me out was that I was in a place where I had already been and I didn't recognize it. That is for a,
frightening.
if you're a search and rescue person, when that happens to you, like you take note of it, right?
Yeah, you do. So you can imagine somebody who doesn't have the training that you have, as to how they would handle it. I could see getting lost being a regular thing out there.
So I've done a lot of research. When Christopher went missing out there, that was before I had moved down, and so I went through a lot of the records of what had happened during that search, because like there's a lot of things that don't make sense to me here. And the thing that was really interesting is that some of the searchers who had gone through there had photographed Bigfoot footprints in that area. And so there's photographic evidence of Bigfoot. We've had many reports in the store of Bigfoot or Sasquatch encounters in that area. We've even had reports of the Klickitat Ape Cat in that area.
Right.
And if you were a cryptid, and you could hide out in Broke Leg Burrows and no one would find you. The hunters in the area refuse to go in there because it's such
No
a
kidding.
navigational mess.
You think?
Right.
And people have gone missing and needed to be rescued. So Broke Leg Burrows to me is a very strange place. Are you guys still with me? My screen just did something funny over here.
Yeah, we're fine. We're with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, this area is maybe 20 minutes away from my store.
Right.
And it's just one of those incredibly strange and mysterious places here in the gorge. In fact, there is an area just north of Broke Leg Burrows called the South Prairie. And normally it's like this beautiful forest with a meadow. And in the springtime, a lake appears there. And literally you can canoe or kayak right through the forest, like right past the tree trunks. They're underwater 4 or 5 feet. And then every year on one day, that lake drains entirely and disappears. And no one knows why.
Wow.
So very strange and unusual place. It's in a section of the wilderness called Indian Heaven. And that's from the original translation of what the First Peoples called it.
Right.
And when you think about heaven, like you can think, oh, it's a nice, beautiful place, or you can think about it as a place where people contact the spirit realms. And based on my personal experiences out there, that seems to be a pretty accurate description.
It sounds like it.
Except for the lake for me.
Yeah, I know.
You know why? Sorry. No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank
before we
you.
get the comment.
No, because I know Lake Erie draws itself back and it's almost flip and dry, because we had a cottage there in the family, and there are other places in the world where it does happen and it's bizarre, but I think there's a scientific reason for that. Whether it's influenced by some frequency from somewhere else is another story, if they're all that way, because the frequency is off in the entire planet. It'd be interesting to see how many of these places do it at the same time. Would be really interesting to do that type of research where, like, why is this happening here? When is it happening? No, and then move on and see what else is doing that, and what else is around it as well. Are we dealing with ocean currents? Are we dealing with types of shifts in the land? If you have ice quakes, all that stuff, ley lines, it all falls in. So I'm just wondering, Yeah, Allison says sounds maybe like another dimension. I agree with that. When you were lost, that felt like a time slip.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. How many people are, if it is dimensional, how many people are just,
Well, 411 will tell you how many people are missing in national parks. That's somewhere where your place is like that. It reminds me of that.
Yeah.
You know.
I've thought about it a lot. And while it was disconcerting to, find myself in that situation,
Yeah.
I thought, so if there was something that didn't want me to go deeper into Broke Leg Burrows, like something that was saying, okay, we're going to bounce you back to start, it was perhaps the most benevolent way that it could have been done, right? Like it was not scary, other than weird, and no harm came to me. In fact, I traveled through some of the most dangerous landscape you can possibly imagine and was entirely unharmed. It was almost like my memory of travel was seamlessly edited. So I had no knowledge of where I had, the time in
So,
between.
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this then, because of the high sightings of extraterrestrials and UFOs, you think maybe you could have been, because it sounds like missing time, like maybe you got snagged and put back with no memory, because that's pretty common.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of answers for you. I can report on my experience and, sort of conjecture some theories.
Yes.
We certainly have UFO activity out here. I don't know if you're familiar with a place called ESETI Ranch. ESETI stands for Enlightened Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And Jim Gilliland has a piece of property just south of Mount Adams. And for decades, people have come out to ESETI Ranch.
Yes.
And they've watched UFOs fly around Mount Adams all night. And people come from all over the world. Many come as skeptics and they leave believers.
Right.
And so that's just one of the components of what kind of a place we're talking about, where there's consistent experiences that multiple people have with things that don't fit into channel normal of reality as we currently understand it. So I have a theory that there's a reason why we way over index on people reporting unusual experiences here in the gorge. And it has to do with the really astonishing story of how the gorge was created.
I was going to say, does geology have anything to do with it? So
my theory
get out
is
of my
yes.
head, James. Sorry.
So the river itself has been flowing here by some estimates for 45 million years. So just on a pure like energetic movement level, to have energy flowing in one direction for that long, you're creating this really powerful current. And you can talk about it in sort of an esoteric sense, like as above, so below. But you could also talk about it in a real physical sense, because there are 14 dams on the Columbia River, hydroelectric dams, and they produce 44% of all of the hydroelectric power in the United States. So
that's
literally the energy of the river is being transformed into an energy that we know how to utilize. And it's getting sent away from the gorge on these, massive transmission lines, right? So we've got transmission lines that crisscross the gorge. And so that's contributing to like a strange electromagnetic environment. So we've got this river flowing for millions of years. Then they think about 16 million years ago, a giant fissure opened in the earth at the Idaho-Washington border. It's 90 miles long, and enormous volumes of lava start spewing out of this thing, like Kilauea volcano type lava, but Kilauea times 10,000. And so they estimate that trillions of gallons of this lava flowed out of here, and it flowed down what used to be a gradual Columbia River Valley and filled it up and flowed 300 miles all the way to the ocean. They believe that if in some places that lava is 3 miles thick, if you spread it out over the entire United States, it would bury the lower 48 states in 60 feet of lava.
Is it solid though?
So it came across in 300 different flows over a span of a couple of million years. And what happened was, so you imagine that lava flows, and as it's cooling, all of the magnetic material in it orients towards the Earth's magnetic north, right? So like there's iron particles and things like that. They all orient, and then it cools and hardens, and it's locked in place. Well, the next flow that comes is maybe a couple thousand, 50,000, 100,000 years later. It flows. The Earth's North Pole, magnetic North Pole, has moved. And so when it cools, its magnetic material is oriented towards a new north. And so we've got this layer cake of rock. In the gorge, there are places where you can see, 20, 30, 40 of these layers. And some of them are, 20 feet tall, some of them are 100 feet tall. But each one of those layers has got a unique magnetic signature. They're all different. And when you look at the government navigation maps, there are bright pink letters that say, warning, your compass readings will be off in the Columbia River Gorge. And in part, it's to do with all of this crazy magnetic stuff.
The magnetics, yes.
So then 2 million years ago, the Cascade Mountains started rising up. And so they took all those layers and they started bending it like this, right? And so we've got the whole gorge is riddled with those magnetic bands now buckled. So it's creating even more complexity and nuance in our electromagnetic environment. And then finally, 15,000 years ago, we had the greatest floods on Earth. So some of your listeners may be familiar with the Younger Dryas floods, or the Ice Age floods, as they're sometimes known.
Right.
What the scientists say is that there was a giant lake that formed in Missoula, Montana, and was held back by a glacial dam. That dam broke in a single day, and that lake drained out and created a flood that was the largest flood of all time. It was as though you had taken all of the rivers on Earth and combined them and then multiplied it times 10.
That was just on the History Channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Eastern Washington was inundated. And in parts of Eastern Washington, the waters, they believe, were 300-400 feet deep. Then they all got held back at a place called Wallula Gap, which is the eastern edge of the gorge. And then it started flowing down the gorge. And in the gorge, the depth of the water was over 1,000 feet.
Crazy.
And so it's flowing at 60 to 70 miles an hour. It's carrying icebergs and rocks and trees, and it completely scours the gorge clean. So any topsoil, any living material, anything that was there before was, sort of flushed down into the ocean. And what that did was it took all of those magnetic layers and it exposed them. And so they're now just sitting there like this gigantic live wire. And when you come to the gorge, and you spend any amount of time here, if you can stop moving and calm your mind for just a minute, you can feel the sense of movement here. Like there is a flow of energy, which is palpable. And so what I think we have here is this really unusual electromagnetic environment. You've got those magnetic layers, they're exposed, they're buckled, they're turned. There's a great number of tectonic stresses going on.
Yeah.
And so there was a professor, Dr. Michael Persinger. He was up at Lord Tide University in Ontario, and he did some really interesting studies in the 80s and 90s. He created a thing, they call it the God helmet. It's basically a motorcycle helmet that they put solenoids on, and they could manipulate magnetic fields around a person's brain.
Right.
And he was able to induce, just by manipulating these magnetic fields, a whole range of unusual perceptions. The most common one was that he was able to create the perception of a sensed presence. Like you would feel that there was another conscious entity.
That's really big in the field right now. I owned one for years and years.
So incredible stuff, right?
Yes,
and
it is.
Amongst the things that he could do was turn on a feeling of great fear and turn it off.
Yes.
So on the one hand, you could say, okay, so he's creating perceptions that are local to a specific mind, right? Like, okay, he's creating a hallucination for you. Right. I don't think that's what's exactly what's happening. So think about like a radio station, and you've got your radio station maybe tuned to a classical music station, and then you slightly adjust the tuning knob, and now you hear rock and roll, or you slightly adjust it again, and now you hear talk radio.
Yes.
So those signals are present in your environment. They're already existing. It's just you're tuned to classical music. And by simply tweaking the receiving apparatus a little bit, now you're perceiving things that have always been there, but weren't a part of your normal receiving setting.
Right.
And so I think what happens is when you come to the gorge, you get mixed up in this crazy electromagnetic environment. There may be influences from the sun as it's influencing our magnetosphere. There may be even things that are going on a personal physical level, like did you eat bananas and you've got an extraordinary amount of potassium in your system on that day,
Right.
whatever it is.
Yes.
And so the combination of all those things is adjusting people's perceptive channel, and they're switching to, you could call it another dimension, you could call it stimulus that is not normally part of your normal perception, but whatever's happening, you're getting switched over. And the reason why I think that is because we have multiple reports where there are co-witnesses. In one case, we had 6 river rafting guides all perceive a UFO that was there for 45 minutes. And so, like, you can't have a localized hallucination in one person's brain if there are multiple witnesses.
Right.
We've got
Correct.
photographs of glowing orbs. We've got photographs of UFOs. And so something that's local to your own brain is not going to be captured on film.
Right.
And so I think that's to me my leading theory about why we've got so many reports of unusual experiences here in the gorge.
Right. No, I you know what, I lend well to that theory because we ourselves are energy beings. Any way you look at it, we are made up of energy. We're made up of water. We can be affected by external frequencies. Everything's about frequency and vibration. So if we're in an area with high levels of EMF, we're going to react one way or another. And the high levels of EMF can make you hallucinate to start with.
Or can make you read better.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got the perfect storm and then you just happen to walk right into it. I can only imagine, what people would be experiencing and how they would come out of it or not come out of it.
Oh yeah, some get physically ill. And then
Sure.
high EMFs are also a great way of communicating with the other side without someone else interfering and tapping your line, so to speak. Which leads to my question. Does aircraft have issues flying over that area?
So we have, not that I'm aware of, maybe in the way you're thinking. So you can imagine with all of so it's an important transportation corridor here. Like there's barge traffic on the river. There's 2 rail lines on either side of the river. There's 2 highways on either side of the river. We've got all these hydroelectric dams. So strategically, from a military perspective, the gorge is an incredibly important strategic location. And so we see military choppers flying up and down the gorge all the time. But we've also had reports of highly advanced aircraft is the best way to say it. Black choppers that don't make any sound, strange vehicles that seem like, they don't seem extraterrestrial, but they seem like, man, they're at the far edge of whatever humans can do.
Yeah.
Then we have reports of, classic UFOs, tic-tac shaped UFOs, triangular shaped UFOs, things of that nature. I don't know of any stories specifically that relate to aircraft having trouble flying here. But
Well, aircraft like passenger aircraft, not necessarily military. Would passenger aircraft have trouble with their radio signals as they cross over?
Yeah, I think military is a bit more sophisticated.
Military is way too sophisticated to be hit by something like that.
Possibly.
And all landing strips land on EMF tablets.
The only thing I can tell you about aircraft, there's a really famous story. So Kenneth Arnold, 1947 June, he's flying and he by Mount Rainier, so just north of us, and he sees 9 flying saucers. This is the first flying saucer report that was popularized in the United States. They fly from north of Mount Rainier, past Mount Rainier, and past where he's flying over the Cascades in a private plane, and he sees them heading towards Mount Adams. And so literally that is the first major recognized UFO sighting in the United States, which sort of kicked off the whole UFO craze in the US. And so while I don't know of any stories of them interfering with commercial aircraft, we do know that there are many reports of commercial aircraft and private aircraft seeing things in the sky that can't be explained by human technology.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I have to wonder with that kind of frequency over there, how they, as advanced as passenger aircraft is, it's still quite sensitive
Yeah.
to frequency and energy. So it doesn't make, to me, it doesn't make sense. And of course, those would be private reports with their own, with their own flight companies. It wouldn't be something that would be out there. I was just curious if you heard of anything. I think that's something they'd keep under wraps. It probably would draw military attention if it was having trouble, and they might try to adjust that because they don't want to be known for it, kind of thing. But that's interesting, because I want to make sure that next time I come over, I don't fly that way. That's all I'm saying.
Bye-bye bubbles. I know.
Like, Seattle's one of my beloved cities. I don't want that. I want to land on the other side where I could see all the lights. Keith Van Allen, hi. Welcome to the show, and thank you for contributing. Keith says maybe Sasquatch uses the magnetic rocks like a focus.
Okay, so you're doing a totally different thing than I put up. So okay, we'll go with this one.
Oh, I saw. Oh, sorry. I saw it highlighted on this side. I didn't look that right. I'm sorry.
Well, no, it reminds me to put them up, so it's okay. We read that one. Okay. This one was first.
Okay, I will read that from this side then.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sasquatch have been reported to be able to cloud men's minds, and Native American shamans too. I've had it happen to me, a similar thing. Wow.
We've had several reports of folks that come in and have reported missing time, and I should say, just like I had a spatial and temporal displacement. So they knew that they were one place, and then suddenly they found themselves back by their car and having no memory of how they got there. Right. There's an area, again, probably 20 minutes from the house, from the store, I should say. On the maps, it's called the Monte Cristo Natural Preserve. The locals call it Monster Mountain because there have been so many Sasquatch sightings. And so this is just north of our store. It's along the White Salmon River, which flows off the White Salmon Glacier on Mount Adams. And in this area, we've had many, many reports of vocalizations of Sasquatch, rock throwing. There have been twisted trees, actual sightings, a number of things. And one of the individuals, in fact, people have brought in hair samples into the store.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. But we've had several stories from that very area, which it's sort of adjacent to Broke Leg Barrows, of people having that time missing spatial and temporal displacement. So yeah, I think that's kind of one of those things that
there's a lot of
once it happened to me, I was kind of excited. I was like, wow.
I know. I think it's fantastic though that there's so many people having these experiences and able to me, the vocalization is just fascinating. So to have so many people be able to comment on that, but the orbs as well have been known to be associated around Sasquatch sightings, like areas where there have been Sasquatch sightings, sometimes seen both at once.
Yeah. So what's really interesting is that there's an area maybe 3 miles from the store. It's called Spring Creek Hatchery. A lot of people launch their like windsurfing boards from this area, and it's right along the river, and it's at the base of Underwood Mountain. And a couple of years ago, before we even started our reporting program, I was taking pictures there of a strange light beam that was coming down into the river. And as I was reviewing them afterwards, there's this blue glowing orb. It's not a lens flare for a number of different reasons. We've talked to a couple of different photographic experts about it. And there it is. It's not a reflection of someone's headlights. It's not swamp gas. It's very clear. It's this, very unique shape. It's got sort of circular, not perfectly. It's got information inside of it. There's film grain in it. And then we also have earlier this year, someone sent us a picture of a tic-tac shaped UFO hovering over the top of Underwood Mountain. So you've got the base of the river with a glowing orb, top with a UFO. And then on Underwood Mountain itself, there are a number of vineyards. This is sort of wine country in Washington State out here. And an individual came into the store and described how they saw 2 red glowing orbs above their property. They descended down to ground level. At that point, according to the report, they turned into a pair of eyes and started approaching. And the person then said, like a switch was thrown, I started to experience extreme fear. And so I ran into the house and grabbed my shotgun. And by the time they came out, the phenomenon had ended. Now, to me, that was a really interesting report. What Dr. Persinger talked about was being able to do that same thing. And the reason why is that the human brain has got magnetite crystals. They're located primarily in the hippocampus and the temporal lobes. These are associated with these kind of experiences. And of course, magnetite is magnetically responsive. And that's what we think he was manipulating. Well, he was able to turn on that feeling of fear and turn it back off. And Underwood Mountain is one of those places where the layers of magnetic material have been buckled and folded into a mountain. And so they're literally in a straight line from the base of the mountain where you're seeing orbs to the middle where you're having these experiences to the top where you're seeing UFOs, an incredible array of phenomenon in a very tightly confined geographic area. And so the whole idea of these orbs in that same area, just a mile down the road from there, we had reports of Sasquatch throwing rocks over people's shoulders while they were fishing. And
yeah, that's common.
so in my mind, they're connected. Like there is
absolutely. I think
some kind of they're related phenomenon, and it's worth studying them together.
I would agree because it just seems to be something that is commonly voiced. People are seeing a mix of everything. But then some people will say, well, we see, UFOs and we see orbs around them as well. So, I mean, I just think, it's just they're just a natural phenomenon in their own right. But, some people get funky with them. So it's nice when you have something else to attribute to them. So when you have a Sasquatch sighting literally a mile down the road and you see these things floating around, some people have seen them floating around literally while they have the sighting, like, in the same location, which is, it's a good start. So do you feel that activity is starting to increase in the area?
I can only talk about the reports that we've received, and we've been here for 2 years doing the thing. And the reports that we receive, they go back in time. So the ones that we like to investigate are the ones that are, most recent.
Of course, yes.
But some of these reports go back to the 1960s. And so this area seems to have been active for a long time. And so I really can't say with any kind of meaningful data that it seems to be increasing or decreasing. My sense is that it is. I think it has to do with the Earth's magnetic shield is weakening. The pole is speed of it's accelerating in its movement, and so we are going through some really intense electromagnetic changes on a planetary scale. And it would make sense to me that more people are experiencing phenomenon as we enter into these unusual things that may be adjusting your internal receivers.
I love that perception because I would have come out and said something along the lines of like I wouldn't even have thought about that. And I love your thought process on that. It's something to really delve into. It will be for me because I'm thinking it's heightened everywhere. If this is what's doing it, that's a really interesting thing to me because you add a lot of science behind it as well. But we're a bigger population. We have technology. I mean, everybody's got one of these. So, I mean, for the most part, so you're going to go out and you're going to record things, or you're going to, if you think you see something, you're going to take a photograph. Everything is in the palm of your hand. It makes it easy to look for it. And people, I think, are opening up a little bit from, I say, like a spiritual or psychic standpoint as well, beyond just the physical. Some of the physical they might be feeling is like, oh, wait a minute, like the hair goes up in the back of your neck, the butterflies in your stomach is usually your body saying, something's here. This is a little bit, this doesn't feel right to me. And maybe that's essentially a spin-off of what you're describing. But I think people are a little bit more open-minded. And I mean, let's face it, you have an entire mountain range and everything along it that has these crazy things going on. People who hike these areas or come into these areas have to have some kind of sense of what goes on with it. Like if I'm new and I've never been there, I mean, what an experience that would be.
Yeah.
Like
all of Washington is so
like
energetic,
everything,
though.
Yeah. But if you've had one or you frequent, people, I mean, I'll back up. People who come to your store, are they usually experienced people who they know what they're looking for and they've done things like this, or are they newbies essentially?
There's a few people that are extremely experienced. Like one guy has seen Sasquatch dozens of times. Is the guy who brought in the hair samples.
Beautiful.
He's seen young ones, old ones, pregnant ones, ones with blonde fur. He even says the young ones have fur and the older ones have hair. He's seen ones that are 13 feet tall and bury brambles. And so for him, apparently there's a pinch point on his property, and he's seen them go through many times. A few folks have come through that are actual paranormal investigators, and they're always fun to talk to. Right. But the majority of folks are locals, and their stories are really underwhelming. and I think that's a really, it speaks to the veracity of it. Because if you come in and you've got this grand tale about UFOs and, being taken to another planet and all this kind of stuff, like that's a pretty involved story. And, there could be numerous motivations for why you'd want to talk about that. Mm-hmm. But some of these reports we get, and the Klickitat Ape Cat is like my favorite because it's kind of unique to where we are. And it's sort of a pure data set, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times people will say, I was driving my ATV and this giant black cat jumped across the trail and scared the crap out of me and I never saw it again. Right. And that's a pretty it's incredible. It's amazing, but it's not like no one's trying to make a reality TV show out of it. You know what I mean? And so, so a lot of the reports, there's two things going on there, I think. One is we are steadfast in being a safe place to report your strange experiences. And surprising to me was this turns out to be one of the most joyful and fulfilling parts of this whole project. Right. When someone has had a really unique experience, a genuine experience that's outside of the normal everyday kind of life, they might talk about it with their family or friends, and their family or friends just try to normalize it and say, oh, you really didn't see what you think you saw, or laugh nervously, or tell you you're crazy. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of get isolated, and to have a place where you can come and to talk about these things is very cathartic for people. I can give you a great example, and it happens to do with one of my employees and the Ape Cat. So the first report we ever got, a guy came into the store close to closing time, and his family and Margie, they knew each other, and she had helped them out with something. And so it's basically kind of a loose friend of the family, but it still took him 45 minutes to work up the courage to tell me his story. And he was orienteering near Buck Creek, 4 miles west of the store. And his compass started acting weird. Shortly thereafter, he looked up, and across the creek was this enormous black cat. And he said that it was sitting there looking at him calmly. It didn't seem to be spooked by him at all. It had long black fur and a long black tail. It stood 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. And so as I'm listening to this story, being an experienced outdoorsman, I'm like, okay, there's a couple of things that are already ringing some bells for me. One, cougars will flee a fresh kill at the sound of a human voice. And the fact that this creature had no fear of a human, unusual. Right. We do have cougars out here, but according to the wildlife professionals, there's no such thing as a black cougar. Cougars are normally tawny or tan, and when they express their melanin, they go to a red color. So a black cat, very strange. Right. 4 to 5 feet tall at the shoulder. Well, a big cougar is 24 inches at the shoulder. 4 to 5 feet tall, is bigger than a tiger. That's the largest cat on the planet. So that's another like, okay, these
It's
are
like a bit of like a dire cat.
yeah.
You know.
And then towards the end of it, once he realized I wasn't going to make fun of him, he said, James, the strangest thing was this cat had a face that looked like a monkey. And so I pressed him on it, and he said, well, it had intelligent ape-like eyes and other primate features. And so, for me, like, wow, this is an incredible story. Never heard anything like it. It's one data point, so we can't extrapolate anything from it other than, wow, that's interesting.
Right.
So the next day I was excited, and I told my employees about it. And one of my employees is Missy. She's a gal that's as honest as the day is long. Like, she feels uncomfortable playing practical jokes on our coworkers because that's kind of like lying, and that's not her gig, right?
Right.
Oh, wow. I must be the devil.
So as I described
That's
this creature
sweet.
to her, she started shaking, like physically shaking, and clearly like filled with emotion. And I said, Missy, what's going on? She said, James, I've seen that thing myself. And she was driving down Klickitat Canyon at dawn, and she saw this enormous black cat walking near the side of the road. She was so taken aback by it that she stopped her car and watched it. And she said that it went into a small patch of tall grass, and then it seemed to disappear. And she actually got out of her car and did a little bit of an investigation. So didn't see it again. She wondered if she should tell there's a few homes nearby, if she should warn them that there's this giant black cat running around near the property. And she thought, oh, let us think I'm crazy. And it's a good thing that she thought that, because when she told her family, they did think she was crazy. And they told her, oh, you probably just saw a cow. So you're grown women. Do you think you'll be able to tell the difference between a cow?
I have a farm next door. I pretty damn well know what a cow looks like. Yeah.
I mean, it's a ridiculous proposition, but you got to give her family some slack, because life is hard enough without giant black cats running around. Like, you kind of want to
gosh, no kidding,
right?
But who's to say somebody didn't breed this?
Well,
exotic animals.
Really interesting idea. And there's a Cold War nuclear laboratory upriver that there's really good evidence that it may have escaped from there.
Yeah.
But
there's probably more than one.
The thing that's remarkable is when she described it to her family, they were imagining a creature the size of a cow, right? Mm. So that's a large animal. And
people don't realize how big they are.
Yeah. So so with these two reports, and in my mind, they were highly credible, because that first guy was a friend of the family, and
they don't have any reason to just come in being close to you and fabricate something. I like this theory, though. Wondered if things like the Jersey Devil, Chupacabra are actually alien animals that were somehow left here by UFOs.
That's a very interesting possibility. And there are stories of big alien cats, like that's a thing. Hard to find a lot of data on it.
Or maybe they were here before us.
Well, so a couple of data points. One is that the folks at East Eddy Ranch claim to be in contact with a number of different extraterrestrial races. One of those races happens to be a race of feline humanoids. And so interesting there. Mm-hmm. We also have petroglyphs in the area, so rock art from the first people. And there are pictures of strange cats. And there is a tradition about a race of underwater supernatural panther protectors. And so one description that I read is that they look like a black panther with the face of a man. So very interesting connection there.
Well, maybe back in the day, Neanderthal, for example, would look very similar to.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting that you bring up Neanderthals, because while there is no living creature that matches the description of the Klickitat Ape Cat,
right,
during the Ice Age, and it's said to have died out 10,000 years ago during the Younger Dryas extinction event, there was a creature called the Panthera atrox. It's an American lion, and its fossil record is really complete. 80 specimens were found in the La Brea tar pits alone down in California. It absolutely lived in Washington State during the Ice Age. And this creature was a cat that was over 1,000 pounds, and interestingly had the largest brain pan of any cat that had ever, or skull brain cavity of any cat that had ever lived and has ever been discovered in the fossil record. So, some interesting connection points. It might be from that, but if you don't want to evoke a supernatural explanation for this, and again, we've had 80 reports. We've had senior law enforcement officials tell us they've seen it. A guy said that he saw it in his driveway with a kit, so a youngling, black cat, big cat and the little one. Reports go back to 1968, so we know that that's longer than the lifespan of any, like a tiger usually lives 15 years. Mm-hmm. So we think that there's a breeding population out here. We've had reports of it swimming in the river. So a lot of different data points from folks.
No irony there. Cats love the water.
So what's really crazy is that during World War II, everyone's familiar with the Manhattan Project, where they used to create the bomb. So Oppenheimer is down in Los Alamos with the engineers designing the bomb. But in Washington State, in a place called Hanford, right along the Columbia River, they build the world's first industrial scale nuclear reactor. And basically they confiscated, kicked everyone off 600 square miles of land. It's got 90 miles of Columbia River coastline. And they started the Department of Energy, the organization that became the Department of Energy. Their first major project was to build Hanford. And this place eventually became known as the Apocalypse Factory because they had 9 nuclear reactors going there that generated enough plutonium to build 60,000 nuclear weapons. So this is one of our most important nuclear sites in the world. So here's the interesting thing. Back in the 1940s, the Allies are terrified the Nazis are going to unlock the secret of the atom and create the bomb. But the Nazis are also super interested in creating super soldiers and super animals. And they had actually resurrected an extinct Ice Age creature called the aurochs, which is this gigantic hyper-aggressive bull. And they populated a forest in Poland with these things. And the Allies, if you think about, that radiation induces mutations. So they were very concerned that the Nazis are also going to get a leg up with radiation experiments on animals. So at Hanford, they brought in a scientist to run an animal testing laboratory, a guy by the name of Dr. Lorne Donaldson from the University of Washington. His only academic achievement before receiving this post was that he had created a super animal. It's called the Donaldson super trout. Animal that's still alive today. It's 8 times larger and stronger than normal trout, reaches sexual maturity in half the time, can swim in salt water and fresh water, and is super survivable, right? He's the guy they put in charge of the animal testing program. Well, we win the war. He gains prominence as, like this nuclear biologist, basically. He winds up going down to the South Pacific. He's at like Bikini Atoll and the disastrous Castle Bravo tests and that whole mess that created the Godzilla myths. He stayed in contact with Hanford. And the new guy who takes over is a guy named Bill Bear. And so Bill died in 2014, but he was in charge of the animal testing program at Hanford. Under his direction, this thing expanded. They could house 1,000 large animals there at a time. Like, it was a massive operation.
That's huge.
There are propaganda films from the 50s that called it the Atomic Zoo. On the surface, they're supposed to be studying things like, if a cow is exposed to radioactive fallout, can you still drink its milk? Stuff like that, like the kind of things that you need to know if a nuclear war happened, like what would happen to our food systems, right?
Yeah.
To your food. Yeah. Food source.
Yeah. So, but Bill, in 3 different interviews, like he does this oral history, like they closed down Hanford in the 80s once the wall came down in Berlin and the Cold War ended. And Hanford has become like the country's biggest super fun cleanup site, because there's not only nuclear waste, but all the chemical processes that they use to strip the plutonium out. And he describes how they were doing radiation experiments on apex predators. And so he tells the story of how they had a whole pack of alligators. And he even holds up a picture of the device they used to irradiate the alligators, right? With alligators in this thing. And he tells the story of how one night, 6 of these irradiated experimental apex predators outsmarted the scientists, escaped their captivity, and got into the Columbia River. And so there are literally experimental irradiated apex predators swimming around in the Columbia.
That's crazy.
It's probably more than just that swimming around there.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
there's actually newspaper articles from the time that talk about it. This is a 100% historically verified fact. It's not even like a made up thing.
Crazy they did for a hand up back
Yeah.
then.
And so they had this covert hunting team that hunted them every day for 6 months from July to January. They only ever caught 4 of them. And even today, we get reports in the store of people who are kayaking and they say they felt something tugging on their boat from underneath. We don't know exactly, if it's the alligators or not, but in these interviews, Bill says even into the 80s, he was getting questions from fish and wildlife professionals asking if he knew anything about alligators in the Columbia, and he just said no and hung up. And then in the interview, he laughs about it, like it was hilarious that he lied to them.
Right.
Well, so you got to ask yourself, what in the hell are they doing with alligators? Like, we don't milk alligators. We don't use alligators for food. Like, why would they be experimenting on apex predators with radiation at Hanford?
Actually, in Louisiana, they eat alligator.
Oh, well, there you go.
Just saying, we know that because Joe.
We're out of New Orleans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can find it in Canada too, in certain places. Gross on I'm just disgusted by it. Sorry, guys.
So this is how many years later?
So what's interesting is the U.S. government since 1958 has used dolphins to guard our most sensitive nuclear sites. In fact, dolphins guard a quarter of the U.S. nuclear stockpile. And the reason why is many nuclear facilities are on waterways. And the biggest threat would be like a Soviet scuba diver coming in at night, surveilling or sabotaging your facility. And you'd think, oh, well, why don't they just use sonar? Well, sonar can't tell the difference between a sea lion, a tuna, and a Soviet scuba diver. So they realized they could train dolphins to distinguish, to tell the difference. And they would rig like this sort of like harpoon-like dart on the nose of the dolphin. Excuse me. And then they train the dolphin to swim and ram that dart into the flesh of the diver. A balloon would inflate, bring the diver to the surface. The Navy would come and scoop them up, and then they would get the intelligence. Like a diver at the bottom of the ocean doesn't do you any good. You kind of want to know who it was and what they were doing there.
Right.
Excuse me. So you look at Hanford, and it is our most critical site, a site that you'd want to protect above all others. In fact, there were 4 Nike missile launch sites. A Nike missile is a nuclear-tipped surface-to-air missile that's designed to take out Soviet bombers by detonating a nuclear explosion over the U.S. civilian population in order to take out bombers. The idea being it's better to bomb our own population than to let these bombers take out Hanford. Like, that's how serious they were. And Hanford's got 90 miles river coastline. And how the heck do you guard that? You can't bring in dolphins because dolphins don't operate in salt water. And the Columbia River is freshwater. And so if you're a cold warrior and you're really serious about this problem, you're going to ask yourself one question. What is the world's best river hunter? Turns out it's a jaguar. So jaguars can hold their breath for 15 minutes. They can swim a kilometer in the open ocean. They can eat underwater. Pound for pound, they're the strongest of the big cats, and they can actually kill alligators with a single bite to the back of the head.
I swear they're part fish. Like, that's just not normal.
They have night vision that's 6 times better than a human being, and they always instinctively drag their prey to shore. So if you're looking for a base animal to create a sentinel creature out of, jaguar is going to be at the top of your list. What we think happened,
they're beautiful cats.
Yeah. So what we think happened was they were experimenting and training jaguars at Hanford to guard the site. Just like the alligators, these creatures outsmarted the scientists and escaped into the wilderness. And once they were out, they couldn't recapture them. And if you look at where Hanford is in relationship to the Columbia River Gorge, if you go north, east, or south from Hanford, you just head deeper into barren desert. If you head west to Klickitat County, you get all this amazing habitat and food sources and everything else. And so the fact that these creatures are unafraid of humans, like if you were training a jaguar, you wouldn't want it to instantly attack humans. In fact, you'd want it to be desensitized to a human presence because it's got to work with its trainers, right? And only when certain commands were given would it attack or would it do its, hunting thing. And of the 80 reports that we've had, none of them are hostile encounters.
No, they're like circus animals.
Yeah. So if you're looking for, like I said, a non-supernatural explanation as to why we've got giant black cats with strange-looking faces running around Klickitat County, this idea that they escaped from the animal testing laboratories at Hanford turns out to be a pretty rational explanation.
Absolutely. It's not far-fetched. Have they not learned anything from Jurassic Park? What is wrong with everyone?
Like, what are you doing?
Like, what is wrong with people? Seriously.
But if you think about it, wasn't Hitler trying to do this for the super race of super soldiers?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With women and gorillas and
you go down the rabbit hole in this one. So at the end of World War II, we were ready to prosecute all the Nazis. Then the Russians started scooping up Nazi scientists, and we're like, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want all that high-powered brains to head over to the Soviets.
To the Americans.
Operation Paperclip.
Right.
And we started bringing scientists over to the U.S., and they became deeply enmeshed in the military-industrial complex.
Right.
And in fact, in that Stranger Things show, Eleven's mom gets wrapped up into, the Majestic program, which is, where they were doing experiments.
Yeah, MK Ultra.
MK Ultra, exactly. And so at Hanford, they literally were testing. They would remove the filters on the radiation stacks and expose the human population surrounding Hanford to radiation and never tell them. And then they would covertly monitor their health records for years. And this all came out in the 80s, like there's a whole downwinder kind of thing.
Right.
But those kind of experiments were absolutely controlled by or influenced by the Nazi presence in our military-industrial complex.
Right. Well, and the sign of the times, the whole age, from what you're saying, it was just a few short years after World War II.
Exactly.
Right.
And we have had reports of cattle mutilations in the area for decades. And in fact, just a few years ago.
Right.
And Bill Baer actually talks about how they would send out teams to go basically take samples from local farmers and ranchers. And so the whole idea of, Men in Black and cattle mutilations and all those kind of things, like Hanford was documented actually doing that kind of stuff. Like they were sending out scientists to take samples of some of the glands of, the reproductive glands and different thyroid and all kinds of other stuff out of cattle. And that's happening right here, just upriver from the Columbia River Gorge. And so the history of weird government stuff, like it is as real here as it could ever be anywhere in the country. And even now, so Hanford closed down in terms of nuclear weapon plutonium production years ago, but it still is the place where the National Pacific Northwest Laboratories are. And there is a device that was recently installed out there called the LIGO. This is it's a laser interferometer gravitational observatory. And it is basically these 2-mile-long vacuum tubes set perpendicular to each other. And it is designed to measure anomalies in the space-time continuum. I am not making this up. You can go to the website and see it. A week after they turned this thing on, and it's located on the Hanford campus, they found anomalies in the space-time continuum. So the crazy, like some people, when I tell them the story of, it's just this sort of mundane animal experimentation that escaped, they're like, you aren't going far enough, dude. Like they were manipulating time and manipulating space. Like some people will say they pulled those creatures out of the Ice Age and brought them back to our time. Speculation, can't say for sure.
Right.
But like,
hey, come on, Philadelphia experiment.
God,
I mean, you can
Manchurian
into like, who
Candidate.
knows?
We
what
can
they
go
were doing.
on. Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting is you look at Mount Adams, where there's all that UFO activity, and you can literally, like I've climbed Mount Adams, you can see Hanford from the top of Mount Adams. And so when you talk about UFO activity existing since the 1940s here in Washington State, well, no wonder. Like, there's so many stories of UFOs actually shutting down nuclear facilities and observing nuclear facilities.
Yes.
So chicken or egg, hard to say which came first, but man, we are in the 1940s, we were creating elements on Earth that never existed on Earth before at Hanford. And now the Columbia River Gorge, outside of being this crazy magnetic anomaly place, is also the place where you are literally toying with the fabric of reality. And if that's not a magnet for intelligent creatures from other dimensions or other places to observe and figure out what the heck we're doing, like, what is?
I agree.
So, yeah.
I agree.
So
we're going to hold that thought, because we have to do a station and sponsor ID. Yeah, sure. This is a job part of our show.
We have to get paid, or there's no air.
I know. So we'll be one quick second, and we're going to get right back to that. So,
well, she lied. I take a little bit longer than a second.
I know.
What a night! You are listening to The Outer Realm with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano, coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans on 105.3 and 107.7 FM radio, as well as the Roku channel. Our guest tonight is James Szubski. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I love that name. It's a lot of fun. Szubski, and we're discussing Columbia River Gorge and all high strangeness. And this one is a doozy. You've never heard this before unless you've seen him on air. And even then, I think he's telling us a little bit more. So I always have to throw that in, right? Piss off all the other people. But anyways, if you are just tuning in, no worries. You don't want to start in the middle. You want to start at the beginning. Just stream our archives on any platform that you normally use. Remember to click like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Simply search United Public Radio and then The Outer Realm. And don't forget to share us with your friends and family. A big, huge shout out to the wonderful people at Folgers Coffee for continuing to support us in sponsoring our show from day one. And guess what, guys? Next week we hit episode 400. Thank you, Folgers. Our fabulous banner and promo media comes courtesy of, and I just lost it. Sorry. Yeah, it's the first day of the week for us. Let me start that again. Our fabulous banner and promo media comes courtesy of horror illustrator Steve McGinnis. He also does commission pieces. So if you're not into the horror illustrator, but you want something done, check him out. You can find him on social media, Facebook, Instagram. He is easy to find and extremely talented. And speaking of talent, our intro and our outro is thank you to Dr. Snick, the sonic surgeon. Justin Snicker is an award-winning composer, vocalist, and musician. You can find his music on Amazon and Bandcamp and stream him on any platform that you use. And I've been letting you know the last few weeks, and don't forget him on your stories, that you can find his music when you're creating your own stories on social media. You can also find Dr. Snick on Facebook and Instagram. And Instagram, he's dropping clips constantly with these really cool, creepy videos. They're so amazing. Now to the last part and our favorite part. If you are watching us right now on Facebook, any one of our group pages, or if you're there on YouTube, give us a like right now. Subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss anything right now. Don't forget to share us with your friends and family. And I'm being kind. I have 2 questions when you have a chance to fit me in, Michelle.
James, what do you think? When do we fit in Amelia?
Well, Michelle produces, so I just wait. I don't want to throw things off if she has a plan. So
well, I feel like I've been jabbering away here the whole time.
You're supposed to. That's why you're here.
You're supposed to be. That's right. Okay, Amelia, we'll give you a little breathing time to get in there, and then James can take it away.
Thank you. So 2 questions, 2 different things completely. One thing, you mentioned that you weren't aware if there were more increasing sightings that you were getting and people coming and telling you, and that they were somewhere really old. Okay, I'm a medium, and I'm just going to let you know this here because I also know this from experience with Michelle and Joe talking. Your past past experiences that you've heard of, some of them are related to people who are present telling you. So this becomes a lineage thing. This is what they tell me in the UFO world. I think it's important to piece it together.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to give you more information. Okay. The other thing, curiosity. You have all these people coming to you and telling you stories at the store. And I believe you were truly called for this. This was an actual calling. It wasn't by accident. Do you ever get any strange visitors, like black suits, SUVs, black SUVs coming around? Do you ever get that kind of attention? Because
Aliens?
you're really putting it out there. You really have a lot of podcasts. You have your own channel on YouTube. I'm just curious, have you ever been approached by someone that you thought could be with the government? Or can you answer that? It's a lot of questions in one. Sorry.
Well, it's an interesting question. And so, I have had a lot of unusual experiences in my military career, in search and rescue, and also personally. And when I made the decision to put up a big sign and invite this strangeness into the store, I have 10 families that I'm responsible for, my employees and that type of stuff. We're not a giant operation. But I did feel a responsibility to put in some protections, right? And, for me, there are, that's occurring on a vibrational level. And so my number one North Star from a management perspective is that we are going to create a healthy and joyful work environment. And the stores themselves are, they're joyful places. We have, lovely incense burning most of the time in the store. We've got, beautiful things to look at. And we work very diligently to maintain joyful interactions with each other and joyful interactions with our customers. And to me, this is building a solid wall to protect these people that I care very much about and that who I feel responsible for. And I've invited this weirdness in, but I wanted to build a vibrational barrier, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so we don't get a lot of like missing persons reports, right? And those things are very real. We don't get a lot of like stories about demons. We don't get a lot of stories about malevolent spirits. We don't get stories about violent encounters with Sasquatch. And so, and that's not an accident. That is, we are putting out a very positive, high vibration, and we're inviting people to share their experiences with a sense of curiosity and wonder. And so the short answer to your question is no, we haven't had scary folks show up. And
well, they're not all scary. They're inquisitive.
Yeah, we've had strange folks show up, and people with a wild eye, and but to me, that's part of the joyful mix of it. And so, and to be sure, like some of the stories are really unsettling. We hear about weird stuff on the regular, but short answer is no. But I will tell you that we've had people come in and report that they have been hiking and trying to get into an area and they've been stopped by soldiers or they've been stopped by men in black SUVs, wearing suits in the wilderness. And there are reports, there are some of our customers who come in and tell us that they have, they're certain that there is some type of international underground base near Mount Adams there where dignitaries from around the world come and fly in, like they have, chopper flight paths that go over their property. And again, I can only tell you what is reported to me.
It all makes sense, though. It really does. And they can explain away the military as being military exercises, and that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm glad to hear everything's good.
Yeah. And like I said, this thing about Christopher Zewitz, who went missing in Brooklet Burrows, that's the first time I've ever really gone deep into a missing persons thing. That wasn't reported. Well, actually, it was. So what's happened is the gorge has got maybe 80,000 people who live here permanently, and we're making a lot of noise about paranormal stuff. And so I'm a recognizable character. I have got this vehicle that I drive around, and it's like a Toyota FJ Cruiser, but it's got spotlights and cameras, and it's rigged up to do, as soon as we hear something, we can head out and, be in the wilderness and doing stuff. And so people now stop me like in the grocery store, and they'll tell me their stories, or at the post office, or on the street, or in restaurants. And so we get a lot of really fun reports that come in that way. And I had a really awesome point to make about that, but it's completely escaped me.
That's okay.
Love that.
Take a deep breath. That happens to us all the time.
This is the outer realm. It happens all the time.
It's like, Michelle, I don't know what I see.
I'm like,
I don't know what it
squirrel,
was.
squirrel.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Squirrel out. Okay, so if we'll chitty chat, maybe it'll come back to you. So just feel safe.
I just remembered. So yeah,
Okay,
so I
good.
was in the-
You
I was
just
in the
needed to
sandwich
breathe.
store, and that's where I heard about Christopher Zitzewitz. And this individual was actually a member of the county council, and he was actually on the search, and he was the one that sort of clued me in that they had military boots on the ground. And he was expressing a story that there was many suspicious points about the military presence on that particular search.
Mhm.
And what really sort of pricked my ears up was that the Air Force pararescue team showed up. So when you're in search and rescue, you are sort of in the top 99% of wilderness professionals. Like, you really have to be on your game. And us search and rescue guys, we look at the pararescue team from the Air Force as the top 99% of the top 1% of us, right? So these are like the most elite search and rescue guys you're ever going to find. And so these guys show up, and then there's also ground pounders. So infantry troops basically searching. And I was an infantry soldier stationed at Fort Lewis, just, maybe 100 miles north of here.
Mm.
And we never were called out on any kind of search and rescue mission.
No.
Like, that is a really unusual thing. And
and they don't miss an inch. They're locked
No.
in lock. If you see it happens, just for the audience to understand, even when there's a missing child in a city or a field, you'll see them locked in arms and move continuously together in as little space between them as possible, and make sure they don't miss even a fingernail.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing about Zitzewitz is that there is no trace of him. They went out, like, they did an immediate hasty search hours after he was lost. Nothing. No strap of clothing, no footprints, no anything. And he's been gone for over 10 years now.
Well, he could have slipped through a portal.
Yeah. And so it is like vanished from the face of the earth. And they, his partner was shouting for him. They investigate his partner, because at this point they're thinking there must be foul play. Like, he must have, killed him and hid the body.
Mm.
Nothing like that. Like, he passed multiple truth tests. And so, like, for me, like, that is the first sort of dark story that I've really had any kind of, firsthand experience with.
And that's one that you know of.
Yeah. And to be sure, there are at least 4 other reports of missing persons from Brook Lake Barrows area. And so this one feels different to me, though. Like, my sense is after my experience of being, bumped back to start, basically, when I was out there exploring the area, I really feel like it was a benevolent replacement of myself. And so whatever happened to Christopher, and I don't know, my sense is that it may not have been violent, or it's tragic for his family that they no longer have him with them, but he may have not have met a bad end. At least that's the way I'm choosing to think about it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if he just like slipped into, like, again, a dimensional thing, maybe an abduction. But again,
when you
you're
look
looking
at
by whom.
Or
you
what?
look at the history of some of these things. So there's the UFO abduction phenomenon, which we're all very familiar with. But when you look at even like the history of Fae in Europe,
Yes.
there are many components that are really, really similar. There seems to be loss of time. There's a reproductive element to it. There's a hybrid children component to it. There's going into realms where you feel like you've entered into the earth or into the water or into the air. And these are also really consistent with shamanic journeys that you see in indigenous tribes all over the world, including here in the Columbia River Gorge. And so there seems to be a real commonality through time and a similarity of experience, which of course is sort of translated differently in each of the different cultures where it takes place. Like you're going to impose a technological explanation. If you come from, 20th century America, you're going to impose a spiritual explanation if you're in the Amazon as an indigenous people. But the core elements of these stories are really, really similar. And we have stories out here of little people. In fact, the petroglyphs, some of the stories that I read were created by little people, these 18-inch tall humanoids.
I was going to say I'm a little person, but I'm higher than 18 inches.
You got some petroglyphs you're hiding out on us?
I'm a little bit taller than 18 inches, not much.
But that is actually, we had another guest up from Northern Ontario, Canada area, an indigenous community up there. Same thing as what you're saying, little people, and they've got a lot of petroglyphs and things like that off the beaten path. I mean, way off the beaten path.
Yeah.
Thunder Bay area, places like that. So that seems about right down that coast.
Yeah. So another one of my employees, was driving home after a late shift, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he saw a small humanoid on the side of the road, no taller than the hood of his car, very skinny, and it had a praying mantis-like head. So this is a guy that I worked with for years, and
Chomp.
And so he had numerous opportunities to make something up. So it's for me, it's a believable story. He said that as he drove past it, his cell phone started acting crazy, like alarm started going off on it, and the console of his car went dark. He got 200 yards down the road, and he felt dizzy and sick. And then he thought for a minute, James is really going to want to know about this. Maybe I should go back and check it out. And then he thought, hell no, I'm not going back to check it out.
I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going back.
Right. And
so
the next day he told me about it. And, I sort of went through an interview process with him. And he said, what's interesting? In that exact same spot in the road, he lives in the desert area. He had seen owls standing by the side of the road at least on 5 other occasions.
Oh, wow.
Oh, God. Tell me the fourth kind isn't real.
I know.
Go ahead. Tell me.
It's all out that way.
Yeah. So when I went out to investigate it, I did find, there was some indistinct tracks, no EMF readings that were interesting, but there were owl pellets out there. And the area was within a couple hundred yards of some high power lines. And so again, like to me, it's hard for me to wrap my head around tiny humanoids. Like that is so out of channel normal. But here I have what in my mind is a highly believable report, personal connection, somebody I know. And the report was so outside of the realm of anything he's ever talked about in the past. And so again, like we have this really incredible mishmash of stuff happening out here. So we were driving my 4-wheel drive, we call it the cryptid. It's got, it's just a fun thing that we do. And we were out, the whole family was out 4x4ing. And we pulled off to let another car pass on the dirt road. And my daughter looked out the window and said, "Oh, there's a big snake out there. It's really cool." I said, "Oh, great." And so as we drove away, she was describing the snake that was about 4 feet long and kind of yellowish. And it had these big frills on the side of its head that started red and they faded to yellow. And I said, "Wait a minute, frills on the side of its head?" And she said, "Yeah." And, and she was describing an animal she had seen outside the car door window. Well, there are no frilled snakes in Washington State, in North America, in South America, in the frickin' world.
Yeah.
And so there's my 10-year-old daughter who's a total badass and goes out on investigations with me all the time, not thinking she's reporting a supernatural or unusual encounter, but she's describing an animal that science does not recognize. And so that's to me what makes this place so wondrous, so incredibly interesting, such a fun place to investigate. And
right.
I mean, like, what a gift to have sort of backward somersaulted into being a focal point for this area and all of these incredible, amazing stories, and sort of beginning to piece together some of these things. They seem related, and it'll be fun as the years go by to sort of try to figure out how.
It's so exciting that I'd like to, hear more. I think we'd like to consider bringing you back. And
I'd love to come back.
Yeah, thank you. And we'd love to have you and just to keep elaborating on some of this, because I know we've only touched on some, like there's a lot more with different types of paranormal activity and apparitions and, different experiencer accounts, even, and talking about different stories that have been relayed to you and ongoing investigations. So if you're, willing, I will email you. We will set up another time in the new year. It's hard to say that already, but
I know.
In the new year.
Yeah. Well, it's been in the new year for the last 2 months. We've been setting up and think about this, because you're on this show. You have approximately 3 million live listeners.
Wow.
You might just get that visit I was asking about. So just beware. Keep that vibration up.
Yeah, I love it.
When I say it, I mean government officials. I don't mean actual men in black. Tommy Lee Jones is not showing up your house, or Will Smith. Will Smith,
like a
Jada
talking
ain't
dog,
letting,
though. That'd be cool. That could be a thing.
Jada ain't letting Will go anywhere lately, so I don't have to worry about that. But
yes, we will bring him back.
Absolutely.
But we're already at the top of the hour, and I really, really want to thank you for joining us. It's such a pleasure. I could listen to your stories, all evening, and I'm just a wealth of information. And I hope you and your family have a really terrific Christmas and holiday. And be safe out there, because it sounds like you just don't know where you're going to step off or step in or step anywhere.
Just bring snacks just in case.
Just bring snacks. Always bring snacks.
Bring snacks just in case, especially with a child. Bring snacks.
So I would encourage your listeners to check out our Facebook page, because that's where we do a lot of updates. And to be honest with you, I'm not as good as I should be. We'd like to.
Well, you have a daughter; more. She can do it for you. Zoom. Yeah. It doesn't matter how old they are; they're more tech efficient than we are.
Well, all the links are in the show right up.
Yeah. So Margie's Outdoor Store on Facebook. We put up a few things on YouTube, and of course our website, margiesoutdoorstore.com, is another great place to get information.
Do you ship out of country?
We don't. In fact, again, like, I'm lame about that kind of stuff, and so I'm just excited to share this information.
Just curious, because I like to shop, so I'm just curious. Not that I'd be wearing any of that stuff, but there's other stuff in there that I'd be interested in. My stilettos don't go into the hiking thing, so yeah.
But we're really happy that you came on the Outer Realm and shared your incredible stories with our audience. And we will definitely do it again as long as you're willing.
Oh, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Well, you'll be hearing
some lovely holidays yourself.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, James. Thank you. I'll be in touch. All right, good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, guys, we have come to the end of another amazing segment. I mean, we were just
flew.
How many times did I go tonight?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
If you can tell us, watch it. And if you can tell us, we'll send you a prize, because
I know it's crazy, but wow. So definitely worth another repeat for sure. So big thank you to James Szubski for coming on the show tonight. It was just phenomenal. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee. Big thank you to Justin Snicker and Steve McGinnis. Thank you all for tuning in. You guys in chat are incredible. Thank you. You always make it so much more fun, and just keep all of that information coming. We love you for it. Tomorrow night, we welcome the return of Daryl Walsh, who's going to not just be discussing Victorian Christmas traditions, but he also does Victorian storytelling. So we thought it would be very cool. Victorians are a pretty dark bunch. I'm just saying, this isn't just going to be frou-frou-y.
No, remember table tipping, seances,
Oh, yeah.
and the Ouija board.
Oh yeah, let's not
era.
forget the macabre cards, and you don't get gifts. No, you get a
Steampunk.
storytelling.
It all comes from there.
I love it. So
Yeah.
we're going to delve into a little bit of that tomorrow night and have a little bit of fun, go back in time a little bit. So be sure to tune in, and thank you all for tuning in tonight. We shall see you tomorrow. Night all.